Hey everybody, this is Jesse P. Gilmore, agency transformation coach and founder of Niche in Control, creator of Leverage for Growth.
And I'm Lucas James, founder of Twiz.io, which scaled from $0 to $200,000 a month with my own agency.
We are the hosts of Leverage for Growth podcast agency leverage episodes. We know that in order to scale your agency successfully, there are multiple shifts that need to happen within the founder's mindsets, skill sets, and leadership styles. We are on a mission to interview marketing and PR agency owners on their journey to 6, 7, and 8 figures and leverage the lessons from their journey to save you time, energy, and money in order for you to get your agency to the next level. If you find value in these episodes, watch the case study video to learn more about Leverage for Growth and how we successfully scale agencies quickly at nicheincontrol.com/case study. That's nicheincontrol.com/case study. You are now listening to Leverage for Growth. Hey everybody, this is Jesse P. Gilmore, founder of Niche in Control and creator of Leverage for Growth. Welcome to the Agency Leverage Edition. Today I am here with Tamara Littleton, the global CEO and founder of The Social Element, a global social media agency enabling brands to harness the power of social and build genuine human connections. Thanks for coming to our show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Jesse. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to start The Social Element?
Yes, of course. So, I was starting a social media agency before there was any social media, really. So, because it was actually before Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. So it was actually quite a different kind of agency to begin with. But I started it because I was working at the BBC. So obviously a very respected company. And I suppose I saw the future. I saw that everyone was getting involved in online communities. There was virtual worlds at the time, forums, and I just thought, you know what, I think brands will move into these online communities, these spaces, and they'll need to be managed properly. So I started it more as a community management kind of company. And then with the explosion of social media marketing, particularly out of the States, actually, it was very much driven by the States, and then it just grew and grew. I sort of pivoted it more into a marketing agency. And now we work with huge brands like Visa and Nissan and Mondelez, Oreo cookies, and all sorts of things. So yeah, it's been quite the journey.
Awesome. And looking back, what do you think were some of those key factors that helped you succeed in those very early stages of the business?
Well, do you know what, Jesse? I think I started it as a remote first company. So being very, very candid, and I'm sure people will understand this, I didn't really have much money when you're starting. I'd taken a small amount of funding from my parents. It was just £10,000. So what's that? Probably about sort of $12,000. And they got a very good investment back several years later. But there wasn't a huge amount of money going around. So I wasn't going to start wasting it on offices. But that turned out to be a really critical part of our success, because we've now grown to be just shy of about 300 people. That's a mixture of full-time and freelancers, and we're based in North America and all over Europe. And by having people in these different countries, it meant that I was able to sort of scale across, globally very quickly. And my first clients, even though I'm headquartered in the UK to begin with, we have an American office. Sorry, not a physical office, but we have an American entity. But my first clients were American clients. And so I think that model allowed for scale, and it's also allowed me to tap into talent, global talent. I didn't have to just sort of hire people from London in the UK. I was just hiring people all over the States and all over Europe. So that was a big factor, that model.
That's awesome. And in those early days, how did you manage to acquire those first clients, and what was that experience like?
So very different to where we are now, because everyone does social media. So there's a lot of competition now, and you have to sort of work hard to stand out. And we've got sort of different ways that we do that. But at the beginning, I'm not going to lie, it was actually quite easy because it was very niche. So there were the first few years that were really difficult, because I was trying to educate people as to what was community, why did they need to have people managing it? And then when it sort of pivoted to more social media marketing, you're still sort of educating the client base. So those were quite difficult first years. And there were times where I sort of thought, am I really doing the right thing here? But then essentially it got to the stage that there were only 3 companies that I was aware of that were doing what we were doing. And the phone used to ring in the old days when people used to just pick up the phone a lot, and of course getting emails, but it was all inbound. It was crazy. You know, these huge brands were just ringing up and just sort of wanting to work with us. And we weren't pitching. I just put together costs in an email and they're like, great, where do I sign? It was insane. Not like that now, but I was very lucky, I think, because we were specialist, niche, and we had got ourselves a good reputation. So that really sort of counted well for us.
That's awesome. And can you discuss a significant challenge that you faced in those earlier days and maybe how you managed to overcome it?
I think challenge was growth. I mean, obviously growth is a privilege, but it was also a challenge. And there was one point where we doubled the size of the agency. So I think it was about, at that stage, we were about 100 people. So we'd sort of grown a fair amount, but because everyone was working in this sort of remote way, not everyone was working full time. It was a really lovely sort of, I was very much pioneering the sort of flexible working, but we had to we won a big gaming client, and we had to bring in about sort of 200 people in the space of 6 months. And that was really challenging to sort of find the right people and to make sure that they're all the right sort of standards. So we just had people who were just dedicated to hiring, but also how to bring them in successfully and make sure that the culture wasn't impacted too much by doubling the size of the company so quickly. And I think, again, the remote model really helped us, because if you were in an office and you suddenly had to expand that fast and bring so many people in, it would just completely change the culture. But because we were able to put them onto one project, and then we just essentially assimilated them with some of the old timers who'd been there, and, you know, got everyone sort of working on a project, and they worked so well together because they'd all joined at the same time. So it was a stressful 6 months, but it was invigorating, and a lot of those people are actually still with us today, which is amazing.
That's awesome, being able to flex as you kind of grow.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about it, but how did you go about building your team, and what qualities did you prioritize when hiring maybe some of those first employees, or maybe even with that massive growth that you talked about?
Sure. So I think because I'd come from corporate background, so I worked at the BBC. I also worked at a company called Cello. I was working in sort of digital from early days. But that corporate background meant that I was very fixated on organizational structure. So one of the first things I did when I started the agencies, I always knew I wanted to be global. And I set up the structure with all of the different divisions. It just so happened that I just did all of those jobs to begin with, but you have to sort of think like that. And I think it allowed me, by having this sort of clear structure, when I started to expand. So at the beginning, it was all sort of freelancers, and then making those sort of first choices as to who were the people who could sort of support me to that next stage. And I was able to hire a lot of people who had been in the corporate life, but were perhaps bringing up children, for example, and they wanted to work from home. Now, if you think about it now, everyone's working from home, and it's not unusual. It was quite unusual back in those times. So having these really sort of powerful people, quite a lot of them were women as well, who wanted to be able to work from home, manage, bring up their children and work for a kind of exciting new company. I was able to bring in some really amazing talent in those early days. And I'm just so grateful that actually some of those early people are now on my exec team. So it's been a mixture as we've grown of like these sort of homegrown people who've been with us for the whole journey. And then as time goes on, you bring in more experts and you expand. And that's one of the key things. It's like I'm really sort of focused on bringing in top talents. Sometimes you have to pay for that talent, but as soon as you can afford to, you bring in that talent, and it will take you to the next level. So yeah, I think really focusing on the skills, the culture, that's allowed us to grow. Every time we started like a new division or selling a new service, because social is always growing, but there's different areas that you can do. So we've invested in top talent, but yeah, some of them are still with me, which is amazing.
That's cool that they're part of your executive team now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So as you have scaled kind of from a small to a medium-sized agency, what operational or structural changes did you need to make, if you can remember back then?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is bringing in experts. So I brought in a consultant. There's an amazing guy called Dan Egerton who works with us, and he audited the agency. I think the philosophy is you start working out how you could be an agency that could be bought, or that there is an exit plan. And it doesn't necessarily mean you want to have an exit plan, or, you know, I've been running this for 21 years very happily. But back in, you know, several years back, probably about 10 years ago or something, bringing in someone who helps you think like that means that you run a much more successful agency, because you're getting this outside consultancy and all this different advice about making sure that you don't have too much reliance on just a couple of clients, you know, the sort of stuff that you don't know. You don't know if you just don't know it. And so you get advice from people. So I think that was a really key thing to do, is to sort of get these, to sort of get the consultants in to help you grow. And I think from there, because we had a full audit of exactly where we needed to change things, we just sort of did it as a huge project plan and took several years to sort of go through and make sure that we were the best that we could possibly be. I mean, I've been very, I don't know, luck comes into some of it, and obviously sort of skills, but we've been profitable nearly all of those years. We've probably got like a sort of track record of like sort of 96% or something like that. So we've invested back into the business every year, and investing back means that you can just make things better. But I'm a strong believer in bringing in outside help to really sort of focus on your structure, and that's what allowed us to grow up a bit, if I'm absolutely honest.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so can you discuss maybe one or two key projects or campaigns that you believe significantly impacted your agency's growth? Maybe it was the outside consultant, or was it something else?
Yeah, well, I think there are various ones that they are important from a nostalgia and a sort of setting the vision. You know, right in the early days, we had some incredible projects that we did in America, like working with GE. I remember we did this incredible campaign that went around all of these different billboards in Times Square in New York. And it was significant because it showed that we were able to do massive scale projects alongside other creative agencies and hold our own in America. And that was 2005. So that was like a really early one, but I think it was significant because it just gave us all the confidence that we can compete on a bigger scale. And then there was things like the gaming project that allowed us to really grow significantly. And it was my first client that I'd won that was over $1 million, you know, just from one client. And that is such a milestone when you realize that, you know, you're able to win those large clients, and the revenue per month was bigger than the revenue per year in the early years. It was just, you know, so they all matter. And I'm a big believer in like looking back, and it kind of gives you that lens to sort of know that you are moving in the right direction, and you can kind of look back, and it just makes you feel better, but it also galvanizes the team. So I think there have been so many. And then more recently, we've sort of changed again, and that, you know, we are absolutely focused on social media, but social media changes so much. So even things like the first time we launched a client on TikTok, for example, these are all significant changes because we then have proof of what we're doing. And, you know, some of the clients we're working with, like Dr. Pepper, we have like a very different strategy that helped them change their way of doing things, that we now do it across all of their brands. So every time we're experimenting and doing different things, we learn, we grow. So it's so hard to name all of them, but I'm so passionate about the clients, so I think it's hard to sort of name all of them.
Sure. And looking back on your journey so far, what are some lessons learned that you'd like to pass on to other agency owners?
So is this the bit where I give the tips? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, let me think. So I would say delegation is absolutely critical. I wasn't always that great at it in the early days. And sometimes it felt like I sort of was forced into it when, I was doing that thing where you're just working so hard and you're trying to just keep everything together and really sort of pushing things forward. And I remember going off sick, and that was the thing that forced me to delegate and sort of let people in my team step up and run things. And then, of course, you realize that they were always capable and always brilliant and possibly much better than you. So that's one of my philosophies now, is you hire great people who are better than you and you get out of the way and you let them fly. So that would be one sort of tip. I think also, actually, it's connected with me sort of saying that, I don't want to be off ill because I'm working too hard. So actually, I'm a great believer in take time off. No one is going to tell me. I don't have anyone saying to me, Tamara, you really should take some time off. That's what I will make sure that my executive team are saying to their leaders and to everyone in the company. I expect them to be doing that. But no one actually does it to me. So I have to remember to do that myself. And I have to prioritize my mental health, my well-being, and take that time off. I'd also say, coming back to really bringing in the consultants, the experts, read great books. It's such a sort of simple thing. And I'm a bit naughty like this because I don't always finish the business books. I love them, but I tend to sort of, you get the concept quite quickly. So I don't necessarily have to sort of read the whole thing. But one of my favorites that I definitely have read was Jim Collins' Good to Great. And we've been big fans of the agency flywheel, and bringing that in to the team really made a difference. I mean, literally, we've sort of added a couple more revenue in 1 year just by bringing in the flywheel, because it just brought everybody together and just had such clear vision of where we were going, what we're all about. And it kind of impacts on your confidence as an agency. So doing a flywheel and reading Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, is a good tip. I've got a few others. I think talents. I mean, I'm obsessed with our culture. It's what keeps me sort of waking up in the morning in a positive way. I love the team. We really take our time to hire the right people, and we're very sort of focused on getting the right talent. But you get the right talent in as everything is driven from there, especially in our business. We are selling our talented people and their brains and their creativity. And so really focus on that. One of the earlier tips, perhaps, for people in perhaps the beginning of their journey or the sort of middle of their journey, just get PR help. Honestly, it makes such a difference. There is, I think I alluded to the fact that there's a lot of competition. You have to stand out, and you need PR to help you be, to cut through and get press and get awards and get noticed. So honestly, whatever you're spending on PR, spend more. And a couple of other things, I think probably going back to well-being, I found it incredibly lonely at the beginning because I didn't really know how to find other company owners, other agency founders. And I started this on my own. I've since co-founded another company, which is an amazing company called Polpeo, which is a crisis simulation company. And we simulate brands being attacked on social. And that's awesome. But what I really love is having a co-founder. It's kind of, I feel like it's faster growth. But being by myself, I think I took time to ask for help. And I would definitely say look for communities. Your podcast, obviously, everything helps, doesn't it? You kind of educate yourself. But I think speaking to other agency founders, it can just be a little bit less lonely, and you can just ask really good advice. So find your community, find the fellow founders, and it really makes a difference. And perhaps my last one, actually, podcasts. I actually ended up starting a podcast during the pandemic called Genuine Humans. And it's been such a great thing to do in terms of it's good content, but it allows me to talk to people who then may become customers and clients, and maybe they won't, and that doesn't matter. That's not why I'm doing it, but you just widen your network and meet incredible people, and it's great to sort of get to know people's stories and get them on the podcast. So I would say that actually agency founders, if you can, start a podcast.
Mm-hmm. Or come on this one.
Yeah, exactly. Get on a podcast or start one, or do both.
Yeah. That's awesome. Awesome. Now, as a female CEO in the social media agency space, what advice would you have for other women who are aspiring to grow their own agencies?
Well, number one, do it. It's brilliant. It's awesome. I think a lot of people and a lot of fellow sort of female founders that I speak to talk about that sense of autonomy and freedom, and you can choose the clients that you want to work with. You get to build the agency that you want to work at. That was one of my sort of philosophies. So I think definitely go for it. There aren't enough of us, and I think there should be more. So I think it's really important, and whatever barriers come in the way, there's always ways around them. And some of the advice that I gave, and delegating and bringing in people that you've worked with before, can be really useful. So I think the main advice is, it would be wrapped up in some of the things I've said. Find your angle as well. I think that PR bit, it's not just about PRing the agency, you have to PR yourself as well. And so sometimes you have to find, well, what makes you special? Why would people come and want to work with you? And that is really critical. And I know that not everyone finds that comfortable. I don't know if it's a gendered thing. I think pretty much all founders find it a little bit difficult, sort of having, you just say to anyone personal brand and they go, oh God, that's, so sometimes you just need help on that. It's easier to get someone else to help you push your personal brand a bit more and get over that feeling of unease that you're just, it's hard. Not everyone wants to sort of put their head above the parapet, but honestly, you have to, in order to cut through and to get noticed and to get, LinkedIn, driving connections on LinkedIn. So try and push through that uneasiness and push your personal brand.
Awesome. And lastly, how do you envision the future growth of the social element? Like, what are you working on right now? What are you excited about in the next maybe 1 to 3 years?
Sure. So world domination, always with world domination. So what I would say is we've had some really exciting times, actually. I think I've never felt so connected to our proposition, and it is about helping brands have this, harnessing the power of social and creating these genuine human connections. And it feels really important, especially now coming out of lockdown, that I think brands are really understanding that power of being so close to consumers on social, and there's just so much fun stuff to be had. So we've been investing heavily, we've been hiring a lot, and we've been investing in much more of our creative skills. So and connecting with influencers and content creators on social, investing in insights and strategy, and also just looking at other areas where there's quite a lot of work going on in how we're helping brands understand the technology side of things as well. So sometimes there are gaps in the market where working with tool providers, and not all brands have time to figure out how to get the best insights or do social listening. So there are sort of little gaps that we end up helping them with various things. And of course, crisis is all part of that as well, with my second company, of how do we sort of weave it all together so that we can help brands protect themselves from a crisis, or at least be prepared when they go through one, because honestly, most brands are going to go through a crisis at some point. Mm-hmm. So really, we're doing a lot of growth, bringing in new talent, really focusing on our flywheel, and it's working. We've grown significantly over the last few years, and so yeah, just keep doing more of the same, but never sit still.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you or follow you and your journey?
Thank you. So LinkedIn is probably where I spend most of my time. So you can just search for Tamara Littleton on LinkedIn. If you want to connect, I would say, can you send a personalized request? Because I tend to delete people who don't do that. So send a personalized connection request. That works. Also, you can find the Social Element. So it's the socialelement.agency. So we're based in US, Europe, and we're, as you can imagine, on every single social platform, including Threads, the newest platform. So just sort of search across Instagram. But I would say, to get to me personally, LinkedIn is the best.
Awesome.
Oh, and listen to my podcast, Genuine Humans. Is that rude to talk about my own podcast on your podcast? I don't know what the etiquette is, Jesse.
No, it's really fine. For anybody that's listening, I'll include all of the links to Tamara and the podcast, as well as the Social Element, in the show notes. And Tamara, I just want to thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Lovely to talk to you.
Agency owners, if you want to transform your agency to sustain and grow without your direct involvement, where you can stop working in the business and switch to working on the business, where you can regain control of your time, delegate effectively, get paid what you're worth, and have your team run the day-to-day, go to nicheincontrol.com/case study right now to learn more about Leverage for Growth. You can book a free strategy session with us to look at your systems, understand what needs to be done in order for you to scale, and get a free strategic plan for the next year to live the life of entrepreneurship that you've always dreamed about. Go to nicheincontrol.com/case study. That is nicheincontrol.com/case study now.